Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Happy to be with you guys. I'm a little tired because I'm just getting back from New York. I spent a couple days there because I did Abby Phillips' show both Monday and Tuesday night. And then I decided that I was going to hang out and participate in some of the Met Gala after parties, something that I'll tell y'all about a little bit later in the show. Uh, got some fun footage, I should say, that I'm sure you guys would love to see of me. Um, Me doing what I do best, which is chair dancing. I don't know about some of you, but I am firmly a first ballot chair dancing Hall of Famer. And so you guys will get to see some of that footage later on in today's show. But I got a lot to get to today. Um, just a quick housekeeping item. I think you guys know one of my good friends, Carrie Champion. Well, Carrie and I are going to do maybe a month worth of lives here on YouTube every Tuesday, starting next Tuesday. So make sure that you guys check that out. We're going to be, I have loosely called it Talk Your Shit Tuesday. I don't know. It just sort of came to me. Or Talk Your Ish, if you prefer that. So we're definitely going to have some good things to talk about, inviting you all into the conversation. And as usual, if you're here, make yourself known in the chat. Would love to hear some of your comments, your thoughts, your questions, particularly about the array of topics that we have going on today. I have a guest that will be joining me. His name is Melik Abdul. He is a GOP strategist. He's, done it for years now. He is a bona fide Black conservative. A lot of people accuse me sometimes of only having questions or only having conversations rather in a vacuum, like only talking to other like-minded people, people who don't quote unquote challenge you. I don't find that to be the case, but Melik is somebody that I've been able to get to know while doing Abby Phillips' show. And he's somebody who has a really interesting and thoughtful perspective. I ain't saying that we agree, but I do think he's somebody worth having a conversation about, particularly, what I'm really interested in hearing from Melik once he joins in a few minutes is about what it's like for him as a Black man to navigate this climate, this era of MAGA, as a Black conservative. And we've seen some of the things that Donald Trump has done and said, particularly that are really, that have been very impactful negatively on the Black community. So I just want to hear Melik's thoughts about how he is choosing to navigate that. And, frankly, what is the GOP's plan, if they even have one, about how they want to appeal, or maybe they don't even care about appealing to Black voters? Because 2028, Trump has said that he's not going to run in 2028. I don't know whether to believe him or not, because, while he may say that, the people around him seem to be saying something opposite, particularly somebody like Steve Bannon, J.D. Vance, his vice president, wouldn't necessarily answer that question. So anyway, lots to get through with Melik, and I think you guys are going to enjoy that conversation. But first, before I invite him in and we begin our conversation, naturally, I wanted to start with what has been, the big breaking news of the day, and that is this: the three of the former cops in Memphis who participated in beating Tyree Nichols to death. We all saw the video. We all know what that was. They have been found not guilty of second-degree murder in Tyree Nichols' death. It was a litany of charges that they were being accused of. And now at the state level, they have been acquitted of those charges. Now, just so everyone is clear, they are still facing federal punishment because they were convicted of some things there. But this all stemmed, of course, from the beating death of Tyree Nichols, which happened in 2023, in January of 2023. It's one of the most vicious attacks most of us have ever seen. Certainly for me, because I'm a certain age, it brought me right back to the days of Rodney King. And I know at this point we've seen so many of these incidents, and seen all manner and different levels of brutality. But this one was very striking for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. But to now see that these three officers, Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justice Smith, to see them not having to face any level of punishment. They were facing aggravated assault, aggravated kidnapping, official misconduct. All of those charges they were facing, they were acquitted on all accounts. Now, these same three officers that were found not guilty, they have previously been found guilty, just so you know, of witness tampering, but they were acquitted of the civil rights charges. And the two other officers, Desmond Mills Jr. and Emmett Martin, they both pleaded guilty already to both state and federal charges. They're awaiting sentencing, so the case basically had to work its way through the state level. The federal part of the punishment has already been decided. But I think a lot of people have an understandably emotional reaction to this case. And even though, again, they will be punished at the federal level, I mean, I think a lot of people can't help but look at what happened as a real step back. And for those who don't know, it's already been reported that these officers were found not guilty by an all-white jury. I think we've all heard that one before. And, make no mistake, because I remember this conversation previously, when this case first was brought to light, and a lot of people, because the officers were Black, were wondering, how is this racist? How is this upholding white supremacy if the officers were Black? White supremacy is a system, okay? It's not, and in that system, much like the patriarchy we live under, misogyny, people who participate in that system and further and advance that system don't all have to be white. It's plenty of people, it's plenty of women who carry the water for misogyny. It's plenty of women who carry the water for patriarchy. It's plenty of Black people who carry the water for white supremacy. And given all the conversations that we've had, I had this conversation with somebody the other day, but this is what we're coming up on, or this is the 10th year, I think, since Ferguson, since that happened. And while there has been some incremental parts of progress, there's also been a lot of reminders that when it comes to policing and criminal justice in this country, a lot of people don't really want to change. We keep talking about reform, but reform, how can you reform this? How can you reform what happened to Tyree Nichols? And so all those conversations that we've been having, basically the last decade, a lot of it just feels like we had it in a vacuum. We had our moment with George Floyd, and we have seen since George Floyd just how much things have regressed. And not just with policing and not just with criminal justice, but with a lot of conversations that we have around how our country generally works. And with this verdict, this is a perfect example of how the system was designed to be. And just because they're Black officers doesn't make what happened to Tyree Nichols any less racist than if they were white. And considering it was an all-white jury that was responsible for this verdict, I think the message here being sent is that they need to uphold a certain standard of violence against Black people, and especially against Black men, and they don't care who carries out the marching orders. Let me remind you that Freddie Gray, the young man who was brutalized, had his spine snapped in Baltimore. Those officers were Black. And so we're back again to Black people having to constantly fight for humanity, for their own dignity, and what should be the basics in this country. And, what they did to Tyree Nichols and the fact that they lied about it, this is all on video. So for everybody who thinks that video is somehow the saving grace and will prevent these incidents and that body cams, no, it's not. Because if the system is intent on carrying out, justifying, rationalizing, and furthering state-sanctioned violence against Black people, a video ain't gonna do shit. And once again, that message has been sent. And so again, I get it. I know there's some people like, well, at least they're facing some federal time. I can't imagine how Tyree Nichols how his family must feel right now. And especially his mom, as we all know the heartbreaking story about, and if you watch the video, which I refuse to play, of him calling out to her is just the same with George Floyd. It's just like same shit, different day. And that doesn't mean we should ever become desensitized to it, but it does let you know that these messages are constantly reinforced about how much we do not matter in this country. Hence why Black Lives Matter was never about an organization. It was never about specific people within those organizations. It was always about a statement and a movement. But I'm going to probably discuss that a little bit more on the back end. And certainly if you have, questions, thoughts about this verdict, make sure that you drop those in the chat. I'll try to show as many as possible because I know you guys have a lot of thoughts and I know a lot of people are emotional and emotions are running high. So that being said, going to take a pivot now and welcome in today's guest. He's somebody, as I said before, that I've gotten a chance to know a little bit doing Abby Phillips' nightly show on CNN. As I told you guys at the top of this conversation, people, especially if you lean left or, you're painted and characterized as a Democrat, that they think you can't have conversations, elevated, eloquent, and thoughtful conversations with conservatives. And that is definitely not true. And we know just based off the election. And I think those of us who grew up in Black environments, Black conservatives are not some kind of unicorn that people didn't know existed. I mean, a lot of us grew up, especially if you grew up in church, you grew up around these conservative principles all around you. But nevertheless, I think now today, because conservatism seems to have changed a lot to me, it's important that we have those conversations with Black folks who are conservatives in our community to try to understand where the common ground is, to try to understand, frankly, a little bit more about our political landscape, which is much more complicated than a lot of us think. So with all that being said, I want to welcome in Melik Abdul, who I mentioned, longtime GOP strategist, commentator, radio host. He does all the things. Melik, welcome and thank you for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it.
I have officially arrived.
Oh, stop it.
To the east side. I have truly moved up to the east side that I am here on your podcast. No, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And you're right. We've had conversations, off-camera conversations. And I think that people, because everybody turns into the television for the action, they don't realize a lot. Now, that's not to say that some people who are one way on camera are the same way behind the camera.
Correct.
But there are people who are really interested in just genuine conversations. So a lot of foolishness is on television and you know who they are. That's what they're there for. But I think most people do appreciate, so a respectful back and forth, even though you may start and end with a disagreement.
Yeah, that is very, very true. So, I mean, I hate to make this sound like almost some kind of after school special or, those this is your brain on drugs commercial. Like I'm asking you about a gateway drug, but just explain and give me some background about like your political journey, about how you grew up, how that informed your politics, and how you kind of, I guess, navigated that into conservatism.
Yeah, so I think I'm much like everybody else, and I would probably say the overwhelming majority of people in the country, white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, left, right, in the middle, or whatever, most people are political products of their environment, in the sense that if you are from rural parts of West Virginia, if you're rural parts of Kentucky or Mississippi, and you're white, it's a good possibility that you're going to end up registering as a Republican simply because everybody around you did. So for me, much like everybody else around me, I registered. I didn't know Democrat or Republican. And I remember the day when I actually voted, the first time ever that I voted, and I was 18, I registered as a Democrat because I've been asked this question before. And I was like, I'm trying to think, when did I first realize the whole Republican versus Democrat thing? But that wasn't until later on, because the reason I registered as a Democrat is because I recognized one of the names on the ballot, and that person was a Democrat. So like most people, I was just a product of a product of my environment. And then came, I've been in DC for a while, so I worked on some local campaigns as a Democrat for years, local mayoral campaigns, council campaigns. I've done that type of stuff. My background is in communications anyway. And so by the time Barack Obama came along, that was the first time I would say that I really even paid attention to national politics, ironically. It was the first time that I volunteered for a presidential campaign. I'm in DC, so we don't get the opportunities to have Senate and House races and all of that type of stuff. So it was a big thing for me to even get involved in Barack Obama's campaign in 2006, 2008, and I was an OG. Much like I tell people I'm an OG Trump supporter, I was an OG Barack Obama supporter, meaning that I was supporting Barack Obama before he even officially announced. Once I saw that man who was at the DNC convention gave that great speech, once he said that he was running, I already knew, because I already had a disposition against like the Clintons. I didn't appreciate what the Clintons represented. I thought that too many people in our community were beholden to the Clintons, despite some of the things that you were even talking about in the previous segment, how those police reform changes ended up disproportionately impacting Black people. That was a thing. But I started to look at that type of stuff after voting for Barack Obama and having some unrealistic expectations of him as a president of the United States. Totally unrealistic, and especially as a Black president. But I started to think about some of the positions that I had. I listened to them campaign against the rich. Everybody, they rich pay your fair share. And I'm like, well, if I'm rich, I want to pay as little as possible. There were different expectations where Democrats, when Barack Obama was in office, and I'll say I'm one of those, even though I voted for Barack Obama in 2012 as well, I'm part of that group of Black men who had been leaving the party and ultimately culminated with the nomination of Hillary Clinton, where I said that I was going to be out of here. But I started to notice some things about Democrats where I'm like, well, damn. So you mean, okay, I get the 2008 election, but you mean to tell me that the 2012 is the most important election of our lifetime? Then the 2016 election was the most important election of our lifetime. Now, by 2020, I was already a Republican anyway, but those type of things that impact, that we talk about, even, what you pay, like your conditions of your schools, what you pay in taxes, all of those things happen at the local level. It doesn't happen at the presidential level. So for me, it was a gradual move to embracing conservatism. I like, even though ain't neither one of them perfect when it comes to holding true to their tenets, the idea of, the financial policy of conservatism, where therefore more deregulation, therefore keeping more money in your pocket. Some of even the social issues, I have a problem with this push that the Democrats have and still have for, biological men competing in spaces with biological women. Like the Democrats, for me, had gone too far from social, just on like social issues. I'm like, well, I'm pro-life, and I would tell, people would argue me down. Well, you can't be a Democrat. How can you be a Democrat and be pro-life? Like, so I'm part of that group of Black men that I would say that people have, even on the left and the right, they fail to capture who we really are. Because you become a Republican, and this is something that this may be more than what you even asked for, but becoming a Republican was also a different transition for me. So I didn't become a Republican because Donald Trump was running for president of the United States. That decision for me had already been made. There were a lot of people who were attached to Donald Trump. And I say, I had my political evolution is tied to the election of Donald Trump, but he's not why I became a Republican. But in order to get put on, you know how that worked. In order to get put on or even be accepted in this space, you had to be full-throated, like MAGA on steroids. And you know just as well as I do, the opportunities are even fewer for Black people in media, where that number is even less for Black conservatives. So I knew that I did not, you know, people tried to box me in and tell me that, you know, all of the sentiments that I had as a Democrat that I still hold dear, that I had to then abandon them. You know, so it hadn't even been an easy transition for me on the Republican side, not embracing conservatism or conservative principles. It is the expectation on people on this side. And nowadays I call them the woke right. And I understand that they don't like that, but it's feeling as if that, you know, feeling as if you need to excuse all of the things that you see with your eyes and you hear with your ears. Now, some things when it comes to race, you know, there's going to be some disagreement on stuff like that. But some stuff for me are just pretty, you know, point blank. So how conservatives, people on the right go at this idea of DEI. Well, you know, I got a lot of pushback because I'm like, well, for many people on the right, DEI means Black and unqualified. How do I know that? Because they say it. So when Charlie Kirk goes out there and says that, you know, he now is going to be uncomfortable where he sees a Black pilot, he's going to automatically think that they're unqualified. That's been part of the uncomfortable transition being Republican. But I say all of that to stress that my evolution, or, you know, in becoming a Republican was a much longer period than just I decided in 2016, oh, well, I like Donald Trump, so I'm going to associate myself with Donald Trump. It was much bigger than that for me, which is why I am open to these type of conversations and disagreeing and being critical of Trump and Republicans when I see fit, because people confuse it where they think that, you know, oh, well, he's saying this because he's getting paid. Let me tell you, run me my check.
Oh, no, trust me. That's one of my favorite things is when people say you're just a Democratic shield. I'm like, where's the check? Because I would love to know. I would love to know where that's coming in.
Yeah, give me my money. But I'm not and we know if I were a surrogate, meaning that there is a financial benefit to me saying all of this stuff, that would be different. But a lot of times it's just me expressing conservatism or explaining certain things about what's happening in government. But that's a long way of answering your question about how I got here. But I thought that the Obama piece was important because, and how I got to the Republican Party, because people often look at me, even in the Republican Party, they still to this day, oh, well, he just in the party because of Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump ain't done nothing for me. I can say that.
But this is the part that is interesting to me. Even though, as you just, you know, thoughtfully explained, your journey into conservatism was not about falling for the cult of personality that is Donald Trump. But that being said, his cult of personality permeates the party. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm just trying to understand how you felt like your values were a better fit in a party that has frankly been objectively hostile. And this is, look, I'm not just coming off like the Democrats have some super clean record when it comes to race. They have done some messed up things as well. I mean, you alluded to the Clintons. I mean, we know about the crime bill. We know that was also on Joe Biden. Like we understand that every time they got what I would say tricked into these tough on crime, thoughtless type of laws, you know, we paid the price for that. Mm-hmm. But the MAGA party and the Republican Party are not the same thing. And so I'm wondering, seeing how the attacks on DI, seeing people like Charlie Kirk, seeing people who are literally considered to be the leaders of your party say such racist things, how do you reconcile that with your definition and your values of conservatism that don't seem to match theirs, not from outside looking in? Well, they don't seem to match.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, part of that is that for the longest time, before I ever stepped in front of a camera, that was in October of 2018, I would watch the news. And I always said that if I ever got on TV, I'm not going to be that guy. Meaning, as soon as you turn on the TV, you know exactly what somebody's going to say simply because of who they are, their name. You know that they go BS you, they're going to gaslight you, because that's the game that's played, where you're going to get on television and act as if you don't know, or not willing to be critical of your own party. And so for me, it's not, and I'm asked that question a lot about how do you reconcile the two. But for me, I have always been committed to saying how I feel. Now, people can disagree with that, but it's always been important for me to call out the things that I personally did. And there are people who say, well, you should have disagreed with this too. But no, you think that I should have disagreed with it. So when it comes to the people like Charlie Kirk, there is no advantage to me beyond me being able to sleep at night, which is the most important thing to me. There is no advantage to me disagreeing with something that some popular person on the right. I'm not a fan of Elon Musk. We've had conversations on TV about Elon Musk. I will say again, I didn't vote for Elon Musk. There are people who are like, well, how could you say that? You know, well, Donald Trump said that Elon Musk was, no, Elon Musk was not. Marco Rubio were the two people. I mean, JD Vance, and I'm probably an omen for 2028, because I think Marco Rubio will be the nominee. But I voted for Donald Trump and JD Vance. I don't have to like Elon Musk simply because Donald Trump does. So that reconciliation process for me is being critical when I think that it's appropriate, and not feeling as if, going back to being put in that box, not feeling as if that I need to be quiet on a number of things, or toe a certain line, or to make, as they say, white people feel more comfortable with me. There are things about the party, there are things about Donald Trump that I'm going to continue to criticize, because that helps me sleep well at night. But you know just as well as I do that how this works in this space. If you want to get the invites, if you want to stay on the good list, if you want to, like Kamala Harris did very well with opening up the VP's residence at the Naval Observatory, people wanted to be on that list. And what were they willing to do in order to stay on that list? They was going to keep their mouth closed. They were only going to go so far in criticizing Joe Biden. So you knew then, when people were claiming that Joe Biden, basically trying to say that that man is like Saquon Barkley up in the camp, that he wasn't there. But you would have people go on TV and lie about it. So me calling out the Charlie Kirks, calling out the Matt Walshes, calling out the Jack Posos and all of that, it's stuff that I would have done as a Democrat. I just continue to do it as a Republican, even though it doesn't financially benefit me in order to do it. Because we joke about, you know, I always joke about being kicked off the White House invite list for the Black History Month program that they had. Well, if I hadn't gone on CNN, if I hadn't been critical of what the Trump administration was doing around DEI, if I had been critical of Elon Musk, more than likely I would have got that invitation. But I'm not pressed or thirsty for an invitation, because I've been to the White House a million times. But in this space, especially being Black on the right, we do feel pressured to toe certain lines, because that's exactly what many white people want to hear. I'm just not going to do it. And people criticize me, even though I still don't do that and defend some of the stuff. I always know at the end of the day that for a lot of people, that's not going to be enough, because their next question is, well, you still a Republican, or you still support Donald Trump? So it doesn't matter how critical I am. That is the constant question. But I still don't understand how you still support him then, because they're not accustomed to having, or they're not accustomed to even turning on the television and finding somebody who's willing to be critical of their side. There are people who would kind of play in the middle on it, but I'll call it out if I see that that's appropriate.
So let me ask you this. Okay, by my math, if I'm, you know, journalism and math don't usually go together. So you have voted for Donald Trump 3 times. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So 2016, 2020, and 2024.
Yes.
Why?
2016, that was that evolution to the Republican Party. I started out as a...
Now, you know, you could have done that without having to vote for him, right?
Well, so, and this is actually going to my next point. So I started out there because, again, this was a transition. You know, it was just a matter of when I was actually going to first register as a Republican. So it started before Donald Trump. That election, I had said to myself, well, I already know I'm gonna be voting for Jeb Bush because Jeb Bush could be the nominee. I'm a fan of the Bush family. That's another thing about me being a Trump Republican or even MAGA. I don't have a problem with Mitch McConnell. I don't have a problem with the Bushes. I was a fan and still remain a fan of the Bush family. So I actually thought that I would be going into that November of 2016 voting for Jeb Bush. So Donald Trump isn't just what didn't bring me to the Republican Party. He wasn't even my first choice. Yeah. By default, Donald Trump became the nominee, and I started listening to a lot of the stuff that Donald Trump was saying, and that was the more populist leaning, the more populist angle of Donald Trump, because he doesn't fit so neatly into the conservative box either, and that's a problem that many conservatives have with him. But I like what Donald Trump, when he talked about America first and some of the more nationalist policies focusing on America. I appreciated that about him, but it was 2016 was about I'm running away. Donald Trump is the guy. But since then, though, I like what Donald Trump did when he was in. I saw what he did in the first term. A lot of stuff that people didn't talk about, but I was on those early phone calls during COVID with Mike Pence and the former Surgeon General, when they were talking about how they were prioritizing Black and brown communities when it came to testing kits and all sort of that thing. So I mean, the Trump administration.
Do you think they actually did that?
Yeah. Oh no, they did. Because, and the reason that I know that is DC is a shining example of that. So the vaccine first hit production late November, around around like early part of December. By the second week in January, DC already had the vaccine available. And in fact, if you remember Kamala Harris, when she did that photo op of her getting the shot, that literally was the supermarket a couple of blocks up from my home. So our mayor worked with the Trump administration to where we had access to not just the vaccine. You could go to the library, you could go to fire stations. They had all around the city, because our mayor literally worked closely with the administration, because what was happening in those early days, especially with the vaccine, is that you couldn't get the vaccine at or you couldn't get the vaccine at the hospital itself. It was a lot of those smaller clinics. Well, that was because of the work that the administration had been doing early on to prioritize like CVS's, Walgreens, because that's where a lot of people were going to get tested. So there were a lot of things that the administration did. It's just that what Donald Trump did, as he does, he walks over his own message, and he sucked all of the oxygen out of the room every single day.
And I was going to bring that up. I mean, he has a lot to do with why this anti-vaccine.
Well, that's why he lost.
Yeah, I mean, why that even started. So seeing how, I mean, let's be real, seeing how incompetently he handled COVID, from the drinking bleach thing. Like, my problem with him a lot of times is that his actions are so loud, I can't hear his message. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, you can't sit up there and, you know, again, do those things behind the scenes and work with the various cities to make the vaccine.
Who knows that?
Yes, exactly. Because every time I see you on TV, you're saying something stupid. And so it's like, it's hard for me to trust that. Yeah. And so that's why I was like, you voted for him 3 times despite seeing all of this. And I guess I'm hearing how so much of what you believe is at odds with what this movement actually is. That's why I'm generally
what you said. And you're right about that. And it took me a while. And I'll say I still struggle with it to a degree, because I associate myself with MAGA. I associate myself.
Why?
Because for me, and I can't even remember when I first heard like the whole MAGA, like it had nothing to do with how people interpret MAGA now. So the whole idea for me, Make America Great Again, it was a political slogan. And for me, it meant moving from a Democrat to a Republican administration. When you talk about making, like, nobody, whether on either party, talks about how great the other party is. So when I mentioned how what they were saying, that every election is the most important election in our lifetime, that's a slogan that people use. So it didn't have the same like racist and bigoted and all of that. Literally, for me, hearing MAGA, it was taking the country back from the Democrats who destroyed it. Now, that's a little hyperbole, but that's kind of how politics works. So I didn't respond to, and people would tell me, well, you know, you're MAGA. And because Donald Trump is not just, I voted for him in 2016, Donald Trump is the first Republican that I ever voted for in my life. So it was easy for people to brand me as MAGA, which is why I say, if somebody want to call me MAGA, I don't care. But I do know that there is definitely a difference in the MAGA movement and the Republican Party. Like, it is, because a lot of that MAGA movement follows Donald Trump in a way similar to how the movement followed Barack Obama. Because you're talking about being
Wait, I just want to make sure that I'm hearing this correctly. You're comparing the movement that followed Barack Obama to the movement of MAGA that's following Trump, because like I don't see those similar at all.
and yeah, and a lot of people wouldn't, but because what it is and it depends on how you look at it, but we're talking about a political movement. So there aren't many movement figures that we've had, at least in my lifetime. You know, people know about Reagan, people know about Clinton, there was Barack Obama, and then you could say Donald Trump, where people still now talk about Reaganism or Reaganomics or whatever. Right. Even though we weren't even alive during that time, they remember Reagan, both the good and bad. And so when I talk about MAGA, it's larger than just the racists or the bigots who are definitely part of the movement, but those people have been part of the right in the Republican Party well before Donald Trump.
So you don't think that those people, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, you don't think the Charlie Kirks, you don't think they've kind of hijacked this party?
They when it comes to the MAGA movement, absolutely. I think that and what you're going to see after Donald Trump is a shift, because for all intents and purposes, the MAGA movement is an extension of what the Tea Party movement was, you know, but they've become a bit more radical. But, you know, the Tea Party movement, how it initially started out, they were anti-establishment and all of that. But these were people who were typically just the base of the Republican Party, if you will. It ain't like MAGA came like the Phoenix and came out of nowhere. These people haven't been in the just going around in the universe. No, they've existed all of this time. They didn't have a person who could lead them. And that's why I made the comparison about Barack Obama, because we've seen, even politically, when Barack Obama is not involved, the party doesn't, or the party or the people that he supports doesn't do as well, because the movement was literally tied to Barack Obama. This movement is literally tied to Donald Trump, and the Republican Party is going to have to figure out how to massage some feelings, because Donald Trump ain't going to be on the ballot in 2028, and I'm not convinced that J.D. Vance would be on the ballot. So there's going to be and mark my word, there's going to be a battle. And if I could predict 2028, I would say that Donald Trump ain't even ready to back J.D. Vance at this point. So you see, you don't have a whole lot of confidence there. But I believe that it's going to be somebody like a J.D. Vance and probably Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is not tied to MAGA in the way that a J.D. Vance is. If you think about it, J.D. Vance is tied to Donald Trump because J.D. Vance hasn't just been around long enough. But you're going to have a whole field of candidates in 2028, and MAGA, the movement that it will not have the same power and influence when Donald Trump is not in office. So
here's where I disagree with you, though, is that let me be very clear. I do find MAGA to be a white supremacist movement. I do. And I think there's plenty of evidence to support that. The problem is that I agree that Donald Trump is a once in a generation political personality. People trying to follow his blueprint, like Ron DeSantis tried it, disastrous, right? Like you cannot get another clone of him. But nevertheless, I do think whoever sits in that seat, and we see this with Marco Rubio now, the thing is, there's a certain amount of gutlessness that Marco Rubio has shown. And we've seen him do the change up. People don't buy that. They find him to be inauthentic because of how much that he switched up. And I get there's a difference between switching up and compromising. Marco Rubio has switched up. All right. And I think the issue is that the base, what is considered to be the pulse of the party, they're going to want to keep the same kind of popularity and same kind of enthusiasm that Donald Trump has. But you can't do that unless you frankly talk the same shit that he talks. I mean, you don't have to be just like him, but you have to appeal to that level of extremism. And no, I don't think that. I think the Republican Party is frankly gone. Like whatever genteel Republican Party that people sort of fell in love with, they like to bring up Ronald Reagan a lot. Like the party of Reagan, that party of Reagan is gone.
Oh, yeah.
And so with that, what's replaced with it is something that is far more extreme. And like your positions that you have, even though we disagree on a few things, your positions that you have to me just don't even fit in this party.
My positions are at odds with MAGA. My positions aren't at odds with the larger Republican Party. What the Republican Party is going to have to figure out, though, in these next years, especially with Trump not being able to run for office, is how do you still maintain some of that enthusiasm for MAGA, but MAGA won't be dictating. So you won't have the Charlie Kirks, the Jack Posos, the Lauren Boebers, the MTGs.
Now why do you think that is? Because I don't.
Because the larger party is still there. Like, I say the institution. The institution is still there, whether people don't want it to be there or not. And when you don't have Donald Trump on the ticket, it is very hard. Like you were right. No people can try to be a carbon copy of Donald Trump. Like people try. Another good example, like people try to be a carbon copy of Barack Obama.
Correct.
But there's only one Barack Obama, much like there's only one Bill Clinton. You may not like Bill Clinton, but even as good as Barack Obama is, and he's great, he's still not Bill Clinton. And I think that people are going to try in the Republican Party, and we're going to have that fight next year during the midterms on what the party is going to look like. I think that the party still will have some of those elements because, again, these people haven't just been out in the wilderness. They've been part of the Republican Party to some degree or the other. What's the challenge for Republicans, though, and that's why I also made the comparison to Barack Obama, is that you won't have that same that MAGA enthusiasm in 2026, nor in 2028, simply because Donald Trump is not on the ballot. And so Republicans are going to have a time trying to, I would probably say, and I think, you know what, since I say what I say anyway, I would say that there are going to be many people in the party who would want a reset. It doesn't mean pushing away some of the more populism or, some of the attention that the administration has made or gains that he's made on some of the more populist, immigration and that sort of thing. But it will need to be a new face, and that person will then represent a new era. And this may be just my wishful thinking, but that person will represent a new era of the Republican Party, because I don't think that MAGA will win in 2028. Because for one, they're going to stay at home.
Well, so let me ask you this. All right, we just saw in this last election, Donald Trump was able to pull in a more significant amount of Black male voters in particular. Mm-hmm. It was an incremental uptick of Black women, but it was obviously Black men. Right. More than Mitt Romney, correct? Like, because I think Mitt Romney and John McCain, Mitt Romney had the record, so to speak. So with that being said, and I talked about this when I introduced you, is like this whole pull yourself up by the bootstrap, personal responsibility, all of those conversations, Black people have been hearing these their entire lives. Mm-hmm. Like these are not new conversations. So when white people want to get into lecturing Black people about how we should be and all that, like we done heard that before. A lot of us are old enough to remember Bill Cosby's pound cake speech. Mm-hmm. We got it. All right. Black people I've always thought this, are a little more, while not a monolith, much more conservative than people actually kind of give us credit for. People, for, I get the allegiance to the Democratic Party, but there's a lot of Black people that lean a lot more conservative. That being said, given what just happened in the last election, and you said you were part of that movement of Black men that is making inroads or coming more over to the Republican Party, is this just my impression? But it feels like this is a large missed opportunity a lot of times for the GOP, because they don't seem to have any cohesive or coherent strategy to actually appeal to Black voters in a way where they're not disgusted by some of the other elements within the party that tend to promote and latch on to the racism. So I guess what I'm getting at is that if you think that MAGA is kind of on its last legs because of, what's to come in the future, do you expect there to be any concerted effort to try to win more Black people into this party? And what does that look like?
Now, I hope. That's the answer. I was going online trying to find, I should have pulled it up beforehand. But and I mentioned this because I'm a data guy, I'm a big comms data guy, so I pay attention to a lot of this stuff. People don't realize, and this is 2022. So in 2022, Mike DeWine, this is the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, and I encourage everybody, this is CNN exit polls. This ain't something that I'm just looking at myself. Mike DeWine got 32% of the Black vote. Nobody talks about it in the entire country. Nobody ever mentions it. But how did he do that? There were a number of things that Mike DeWine did in the state around business development. There was an appeal that Mike DeWine made during COVID, his appeal to the clergy in the state, his things that he did around education, like charter schools and all of that. That's how Mike DeWine got 32% of the vote. Now, in Donald Trump's case, and you're right, there was an uptick from Donald Trump. I think John McCain got 4% of the Black vote. Mitt Romney got 6% or something like that. Correct. Of the Black vote. Now, what I fear, what concerns me about the Republican Party, because you're right, you pointed out that they haven't made any concerted effort to reach out to Black voters. This is in part because of what the woke right has done when it comes to identities. Because see, now that's too much like focusing on an identity or focusing on a particular group of people. When Donald Trump had the Platinum Plan, it was an extension of basically all he did was just compile the list of things that he would do. None of those things directly impacted Black people in the same way that when Kamala Harris released her plan from Black men, nothing on that list was specific to Black men. Mm-hmm. But what concerns me about what the Trump administration doing in this anti-DEI, identity, period that we're in, I fear that they are going to be lulled by the drowsy poppies out there and saying, well, we got a good percentage of the Black vote this time around, so we're not going to have to do anything. And I think that they're going to rest on their laurels, assuming that they're not going to have to make any type of direct appeals. And I think that that's what the party is going to do, because those people also, again, Donald Trump is not going to be on the ballot in 2028. So will those same people who showed up for him in 2024 show up in 2028, especially if they don't feel as if they're doing better, as far as the economy is concerned, if they feel as if that there's a national crisis. I mentioned COVID and how it's not Donald Trump's government response to COVID that I think lost him the election. It's Donald Trump's personal response, where arguing with people, you arguing with Jim Acosta for a whole hour before the, COVID, working group were able to talk about what they were doing to mitigate the impact of COVID. It was how Donald Trump personally responded to it that made, where he ended up the election ended up being tanked, but not making any type of direct appeal. And what they could do, much like Kamala Harris did, much like Joe Biden did when he was running for that period of time, and even Donald Trump with the Platinum Plan, they're going to have to talk about how these policies, how Black people are impacted by policy. So I think talking about stuff like school choice, talk about how if you're in a place like Washington, D.C., yes, a kid who lives in my ward in Ward 8, Washington, D.C., should absolutely be able to use a voucher to go to a Sitwell Friends or a National Cathedral or a Murray or Georgetown Day or any of these top tier private schools. The Republican Party is going to have to talk about what Brian Kemp did down in Georgia. Business development. That's how one of the reasons that Brian Kemp won in his reelection, because he was big on things like business development, where the party is pulled to the right, where you have the people like the Charlie Kirks and others, and why I think that they cause them problems. Donald Trump talked about the First Step Act. You talked about the police reform earlier, but Donald Trump got the First Step signed into law. Did you hear anything about the First Step Act during the campaign? No. Why? Because Ron DeSantis and Mike Pence, who was standing alongside Donald Trump when he signed the First Step Act into law, they began to then criticize Donald Trump for releasing criminals, into the streets because of the First Steps Act. So I think that Donald Trump can do himself, and you'll understand it, even though I don't like the connection when people make it every time we talk about Black stuff, it has to be around things like police reform, as if that don't impact other people. But I do believe if Donald Trump did some symbolic stuff that has some real substantive impact, like a Second Step Act. Like, where is the Second Step Act? That's not something that the First Step Act didn't just, benefit Black people. It benefited everybody. But I think that the Republican Party, they're going to have to start tailoring their message to say, this is how this impacts you. Now, the Democrats going to have to do the same thing.
Yeah, no, they both do. And the issue, though, with the Republicans, and to some degree,
it's a higher climb for us.
It's a much higher climb. And you're right, it is an issue for the Democrats as well, is because even though they've done good things that have directly benefited the Black community, they are not loud about what those things are, and in terms of explaining what they are. And see, the other problem, too, is that, again, Donald Trump, you can do the First Step Act. That was bipartisan legislation. It was other Republicans that were on board with doing that. But then in the same breath, you also give Bill Barr the authority. Then you bring back the death penalty. Then you say other things that make me, again, I would believe you more if your actions wasn't so loud. So you can't say on one end or have him or the party try to appeal to Black people when we see the book banning, we see the pressure he's putting on the National African American Historical Museum in DC. We see all of these things happening. So yeah, they're going to have a really hard time, even though, everybody's worried about the economy. They're going to have a difficult time trying to prove to a lot of other Black people that this is the party for them. I am of the opinion that a lot of Black men who did vote for Donald Trump this time around, it was primarily out of frustration. And I get that frustration. They do not see themselves in the other party or see their needs and being met or addressed or discussed.
And we're tired of being lectured to. Like, you don't understand how many people, even though I knew that they voted for Kamala Harris, I can't tell you the number of Black men that I had a conversation with who said that they did not like Barack Obama's tone when
he talked to those group.
It was condescending. Yes. It was very condescending. And these are people who still ultimately supported, Kamala Harris, like that type of condescension. And that's why I mentioned this uptick that Republicans got, it's not permanent. No. So they're going to have to do some work. And we have
But Melik, are you even convinced they want to do the work?
I'm convinced that the Republican Party itself does. And I say that because I've met with Republican members of the Senate. I know people on the Hill. If you get into conversations with them, they are on board with a lot of the legislative things. Like even back in 2020, and it's not even a thing now, but the Justice Act. Nobody actually talks about the Republican Party's companion legislation, the Justice Act, which was their companion to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Every single Tim Scott, the same one that they call an Uncle Tom all the time and all of that. Tim Scott got every single one of his Republican colleagues to sign on as co-sponsors of police reform. Democrats said, we're going to filibuster it. And so it never actually hit the floor, even though one of the, an amendment, if they had allowed that to go to the floor, Rand Paul would have been able to introduce the Breonna Taylor Act. And the Breonna Taylor Act would have allowed for more restrictions on like chokeholds and stuff like that. But Democrats blocked it from going to the floor. That was an opportunity.
But be fair, say why though?
Because what they said was qualified immunity. And even though that is a layer, and I tell people, go back and look at the overlap of the two bills. There was about 75% overlap between the Democrat and Republican bill. The sticking point, though, was overqualified immunity. And that's fine. People will say, well, you know what? We should have held the line, even though we agreed on 75% of the bill. I don't agree with this 25%, so therefore they should throw the bill away. I don't think that that's a good thing, because had we had Democrats not filibustered it, we would have had some at least reforms to policing. Well, I don't see that happening now at all, because we've kind of moved further to the right on this issue of police reform, but it was a lost opportunity in Republicans, not the people who are online. I ain't talking about the people who are loud and wrong online, because they don't do a lot in furtherance of the Republican Party. Check them out. They do a lot to help Donald Trump. They do a lot to help their own personal movements, but you don't see them out here advocating for the Republican Party, which is why I support people like Mitch McConnell. I support people like Lisa Murkowski and all of them, because they do more for the party than many of those loud MAGA voices. And much like I was telling people during the Trump era, the first Trump term, they ain't gonna have no use for these people next time around, because they would have, kind of hoard themselves out enough. Well, think of where people like Candace Owens is now. Now she didn't decided she go on a couple of, black outlets, but
she's trying to rebrand. And
but Candace Owens doesn't have the same space, and the party doesn't have the same interest in Candace, much like these people who are very big, now big names, especially the black people. The party is not going to have much use for them after Donald Trump. So you're going to have a lot of people trying to find their own way. So that's why I think that it's definitely going to be a fight, after Donald Trump leaves. And I think it's going to be a fight, but at the end, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, the establishment always wins. And I think that that's what's going to end up happening. The establishment is going to win. And Donald Trump, I wouldn't, and you'll be able to know, and I'm going to definitely bookmark this, because if Donald Trump endorses J.D. Vance early, it is not going to stop anybody from getting out of the race.
No, and because J.D. Vance, frankly, he has a likability problem. A lot of people don't like him. He comes off as unlikable.
I ain't ready to vote for J.D. Vance. I'm saying right now, if of everybody who is kind of even being mentioned at this point, I'm going Marco Rubio. Like I can't imagine going, unless Tim Scott was my guy, but unfortunately Tim Scott's campaign was just a little trash.
Oh, Melik, we're gonna have to improve your taste in politicians. But before I let you go, because I saw you say, I think you did a sit-down conversation with Pastor Jamal Bryant.
I did.
Not too long ago. That was very insightful. And I want to ask you this, especially now that I think we're a little bit further along, and certainly you've seen everything that's even just happened in the last week. So if you could go back in the DeLorean, you telling me in 2024, being what we've seen in this first 100 days plus, would you still cast your vote for Donald Trump, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. And much like I said on his show, I've never, even though you've heard me articulate, and whether people agree with it or not, my feelings about Barack Obama, not once did you ever hear me say, I regret voting for Barack Obama. Like I've never regretted a vote, even when I didn't, as with most politicians.
Is that mostly just like a personal thing as opposed to like?
Because because you regret your vote in what? You can't take it back. you say, oh, I wish I hadn't voted for that person. And see, for me, my eyes are wide open. So if I say, because, if you can imagine, people would be like, well, so if Donald Trump does something that's racist, would that be the end of the line with you? Okay, maybe, but
wait, if he did, if he has, and so it wasn't clearly the end of the line with you.
But because that is more of a subjective thing on what you consider racism, or the things that Donald Trump has done. People say that Donald Trump opens up his mouth and Donald Trump is racist. But there are things, obviously, like I said on this show, if there was something criminal that Donald Trump did, ended up being.
Well, he did deny housing to the Black and brown people, and did it for a very specific.
Yeah, but that was like in the 1970s. And
okay, and then he still won't apologize to Exonerated 5. I mean, there's a long list.
And I agree with you on that. But at the same time, after Donald Trump, the lawsuit in the 1970s, after the Central Park Five, Donald Trump was still a central figure in the Hollywood, New York spaces. So that was, whether it's the NAACP, whether
with all due respect, Malik, I don't judge you based off how you treat famous people. I don't give a shit how you treat famous people. I'm saying
he was still as racist as people, at the people who had no problem being photographed with Donald Trump when he was the man around.
But he also was a different. Yeah. He used to be pro-choice, right? Like, I mean, let's just be honest. He was a different person. It is so much different when you're not an elected official.
I agree.
In charge of everything. You have a different responsibility.
No, I totally agree with you on that. But as far as just me, so no, I can't imagine, because for me, if it will make somebody else feel good to say that I regret my vote for Barack Obama. Because people ask me all the time, I know you hated being a Democrat, or you regretted being a Democrat or supporting Barack Obama. No, because what does that mean to say that I regret my vote for Barack Obama? Okay, well, that vote, he's already been out of office. He's been president. So yeah, there's something, there are many areas that I regularly in many areas where I regularly disagree with with Donald Trump. So for me, it's not me regretting a vote, because I'm a grown. I don't trust politicians any more than I trust somebody walking down the street. So I don't have that what I had with Barack Obama. Like, that was my guy. Like, I felt a personal connection to him, and if you talked about him, I took it personally. I don't have that with Donald Trump. Like, when Donald Trump leaves, that's gonna be it. The pastor asked me, or we got into a conversation about possibly, voting for Donald Trump, if he was able to run for president, or maybe it was another show, I can't remember. And hell no, I don't have any interest in if Donald.
So he asked you if Obama was able to run again, would you vote for him again? Is that what the question?
No. He was asking me if the laws, the Constitution.
Oh, if Donald Trump ran again.
If Donald Trump ran again, would I support Donald Trump? Hell to the no. I voted for him 3 times already. Me, in my political evolution of sorts, I would be ready to move on from Donald Trump in that association.
Okay, so maybe regretting your vote, maybe regret is too heavy of a word. But looking at where the economy is, looking at this trade war that appears to be very strategyless, some of it strategy, you kind of understand and you get it. Like, I think everybody can agree that us becoming a consumption society, which this is not something that just started yesterday. America has become consumption driven. Because you're consumption driven, that means you're relying on someone else to provide the product. I think across both parties, there should be wide agreement. Like, yes, we have allowed China to get away with a lot. China definitely, we are over reliant on them when it comes to production. So I think those concepts ring true. However, the strategy to try to unwind this, are you on board with what?
No at all. I think that the Trump administration made a lot of because these aren't and unfortunately it's not rookie mistakes. I remind people that Donald Trump was president before. So for me, in how Donald Trump managed certain things, the attention that he paid to certain things, it was not the same as what it is now. And I jokingly talk about, maybe that's what life was like having Jared and Ivanka in the actual White House, because now Donald Trump is he's surrounded by people who have different sensitivities of like the Jared and Ivankas. And so they, even though as hard, as difficult as some of these discussions and all of that stuff is, when it comes to Donald Trump, like I would be ready to move on. And I think that's, to be honest, I think that's going to be the mood, not of MAGA. And when you say MAGA, you got to also talk about the people who benefit from associating themselves with Donald Trump. They don't even care. Who cares whether it's Donald Trump or somebody else? They would have been the same when it comes to Ron DeSantis. But I think that just a lot of people will be ready to move on from Donald Trump. But you can't, Donald Trump sticks his foot in his own mouth a whole lot. If he had come out in a much different way, for instance, even if Donald Trump had said from the jump, instead of throwing Elon Musk into these agencies to wreak havoc, and he's walking around with his chainsaw, maybe we're going to take a 90-day review period to then make sure where these, the cuts need to happen. Elon Musk did all of this talking. And I ultimately do believe, much like the article that I wrote in the Washington Examiner about the GOP's Elon Musk problem, I think that a lot of the problems, because you can't blame Elon Musk for everything, because Donald Trump is the president of the United States.
Right.
So
and he's empowered him to do these things.
He's empowered to do and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think that history will tell the story that Elon Musk did much less for Donald Trump in the Republican Party than Conservative Inc. are willing to say at this point, because demand then went from 2 million to 1 million. And I think the latest number that I got, Elon Musk has saved about 150 or so billion dollars. All of the stuff that they were saying that was going to happen, you were going to get federal workers. They didn't want to go back into the office. Well, they're not going to want to go back, so they're going to resign. They're going to take a buyout. Well, that didn't happen. They're doing the same thing as some of these agencies. And I think that if the much like with tariffs, if Donald Trump had come out from the gate and said we're going to have a 90-day review period on these tariffs, instead of making such a production about Liberation Day, and within hours on Liberation Day, had to turn right back around and say, oh, okay, wait, hold up, Slim. I'm gonna give you 90 days. And then you had the White House and everybody in Conservative Inc. This is art of the deal. No, it ain't.
No,
that is bad moves that the administration made. And I think it factors into even some of the recent polling that we have. It's not that people don't agree with eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse.
Right.
All of the polls,
yes.
All of the polls, whether it's from Fox News on around, say that people have a problem with how the administration has implemented how it's gone about doing the stuff that he wants to do. So you letting Elon Musk go ham, then having to go correct stuff, talking about stuff that was in bills that's not in the bills, that is something that Donald Trump allowed. What I'm hoping, and we don't know, but I'm hoping that, I'll say this is my political analysis. It's only been roughly 100 days, but that's also a benefit to Donald Trump because he does have time. If Donald Trump does not take advantage of the time that he had to get us a deal on tariffs, and I mean an early deal on tariffs, and I ain't saying a deal with Venezuela. Like, that's important. It's going to have to be.
It has to be China.
China, Canada, the EU, any of these big powerhouses, he's going to have to do that. We're heading into the summer months. It is projected the energy, forgot what it's called, administration, Energy Information Administration has already predicted that gas prices are going to be lowered probably about 3% in the coming months. Like, those are the things that Donald Trump is going to have to really start focusing on post Elon Musk. So I'm hoping that there is a turn after Elon Musk, but I'm not holding out hope that turn is, because he may feel even more emboldened to not change anything. I'm just thinking that if the first term was an indicator that Donald Trump would have to see that we need to do a reset. And you can tell by some of the stuff that Donald Trump is saying, even how he's kind of backed away a little bit when it comes to China, because he was waiting on China to call,
and
that
China didn't
day.
call. As I
China
said
didn't call.
on Abby's show, I was like, no, China had this plan saved in drafts. They've been waiting on this moment, and unfortunately, because Donald Trump lacks decorum, a lot of times he's very thoughtless. Like, he does stuff, thinks about it later, comes back, and his ego won't allow him to take a public loss. I think these are all bad traits to have at this time when we're facing all of these different challenges. I mean, Elon Musk is one challenge. The economy is another challenge. And by the way, really low gas prices ain't always a great thing. We had abominably low gas prices during COVID, but the economy was, very volatile in other parts. So, like, he's got a lot of problems that he needs to solve.
That he causes.
And that's the problem. He did not give himself any kind of runway, and he's put more pressure on the party, because I'm telling you, these midterms going to be ugly for them. If it keeps up like this.
Senate. Now, I'll make a prediction with you. I think we're going to keep the Senate. I do hate that Brian Kemp decided not to run for the Senate, because I thought it would have been a sure-in for Brian Kemp. I think from what I'm hearing, this is now a precursor to 2028 for Brian Kemp. He's going to become a nominee in 2028, even though he could possibly be a VP. But I do think that, there are some things happening like in this space. So I think that we're going to keep the Senate. The House, though, aside from history, because history, at least you lose one. The party
lose one of them, usually. Yes, that is true.
So it is much more likely that we will lose the House, because what's happening? Donald Trump won't be on the ballot. And we've seen over and over again, when Donald Trump is not on the ballot,
what happens with the enthusiasm. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Melik, I have kept you far too long. I really thank you so much for participating in this conversation, giving some, giving people some things to think about. And, you may say you're MAGA. I got my doubts, though. I got my doubts.
You sound like, if Pastor Brian is watching this, you sound exactly like him.
Maybe, listen, if two people are in agreement, maybe that should tell you something. Two people who do not know each other, that should tell you something. Anyway, Melik, take care, and I will see you soon, hopefully on CNN.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Take care. All right, that was my man Melik Abdul, who I've gotten to know, as I said, on CNN. And I went a little bit past time, though. I guess on YouTube, you don't necessarily have a you don't have a particular time constraint I'm up against, but I wanted to just make sure that quickly I got to a couple of other things. We were having that conversation about, politics, and especially as it related to Black men and what they're seeing, the uptick in numbers and the number of them that voted for Donald Trump. I really do think that this is about frustration more than it is about voting for Donald Trump. Wesley Moore, who is the the governor of Maryland, he said something that has stuck with me. He said it a while ago, is that, Donald Trump is the vessel for the frustration, but he's not the solution. And so I think a lot of people were super frustrated with the Democratic Party, with their lack of outreach, with their lack of connection. I'll just say that. And as a result, said, let me just try something different, even though the Republicans presented no plan for Black people. They had nothing. So as much as people, to a certain point, wanted to get on Kamala about her coming up with a plan late, but she came up with a plan because she was responding to the concerns of the constituents, right? Donald Trump didn't have a plan. Nothing. He presented nothing to Black men that would be like, you know what, that. Otherwise, I think I would deeply understand it, but that's why I knew it was about sort of frustration. Now, while we are on the topic of Black men, there was something that I wanted to show you guys that I ran across, and this is a pivot. We're going to go from politics to talking about mental health. I'm not going to play all of this video, but I saw this video on Twitter, and to me, it was benign. It was a young lady who's in the mental health space. She was talking about Black men and mental health, and I was really surprised by some of the responses she got from Black men, which largely were negative. So I'm going to play a little bit of that clip. I want you guys to listen to it, and then we'll have a conversation about it on the back end.
A lot of Black men, if not most Black men that I personally know, deal with destination addiction. And I know Black men from all different levels of their journey, all different ages, and a lot say the same thing. When they reach that destination that they think will make them happy, it ends up being a sad moment because they realize how much time went by and they didn't allow themselves to be happy throughout the duration of the journey of getting to the destination. And if you really think about it, like each destination or moment of success might last a day, 2 days, a week. Like it's like getting a new car, you know, but those 5 years or 10 years it took to get to that destination are a lot more valuable than that 1 week or that one day. And it's often realized when Black men are on top of one mountain, they create another mountain or create another level. So it's this constant chasing for this constant carrot that is just seems to never be enough. And so a lot of my affirmations were based in enjoying the journey, accepting who you are today, accepting what you have today, and allowing yourself to enjoy your life because Black man, you are human. You deserve to enjoy this experience, even if cards are down or if relationships are down or if money is down. If you can be a man who is able to keep a positive mindset despite your circumstances, nothing is going to be able to shake you. And that's why receiving content, you know, I know sometimes I may get a little bit
That was just a little bit of what this young lady had to say. And I thought that those comments were largely, pretty benign. But this is the response that she got was really surprising to me. And this is like one of them, one of the responses. This Black man here, he had this to say. This is with all men. What women don't realize is you really just how stressful life is as a man if we do not have the luck and we do not have, excuse me, the luxury of choosing to be happy. Now, notice that what he said that Black men don't have the luxury of choosing to be happy. 90% of the road to success for a man is suffering so that you can create happiness for those around you. And, he wasn't the only person that kind of, the only Black man that kind of had these thoughts. This was like another one. This guy tweeted, that's for all of us men. We don't work or we don't eat. We don't get loved and aren't expected to. We have to produce results in life. We have to sacrifice our happiness to make everyone happy. And so it just, kind of brought me to a thought of, and it's kind of a crazy, question, but do Black men consider seeking happiness a luxury? It's like happiness shouldn't be a luxury. And I realize that men are definitely wired very differently, results oriented, solution oriented. That's not to say that women don't seek results or solution. But at the same time, just this idea that there's a lot of Black men out there who don't believe happiness is for them. And many, when I put this very same video on my Instagram page, a lot of Black men responded talking about peace as opposed to happiness. I consider them one and the same, but I definitely understood the different distinctions as to why it would be seen so differently. But it just struck me as a little sad that a lot of Black men out here have never even thought about the concept of being happy and like what that looks like for them. So I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with that. You see, I have the question posed right there. Do Black men consider seeking happiness a luxury? Here you see Ronald says a lot of our successes are short-lived. Yeah, I mean, that goes for anybody. But at the same time, you deserve it. You deserve to at least seek it, deserve to at least think about it. And while we all definitely are here to some degree, part of our human responsibility is to serve others. You have families, you might have a wife, you have kids, and vice versa. Yes, some of our job and our responsibility as human beings is to serve others. But I'm of the belief that if there's not a piece or a corner of yourself or things that you do in your life that are just for you, just to make you happy, to me, you will fail everybody else in your life. You will absolutely fail. So yeah, here we have Darren, who says happiness and contentment doesn't have to equal settling. I 1,000% agree. Because I do find that a lot of men, especially Black men, are okay with the settling part. Now, I could easily make the case that when it comes to women, because I think women have been conditioned more to prioritize and to think about their happiness, I think sometimes we can go too far, right? Is that you will have some women out there where they'll be 97 out of 100 things in their life will be things that make them happy, or things along those lines. And if the three little pieces are not, women will blow it all up. But I think men are kind of the opposite, where you all could have one thing out of the 100 things that make you happy, and you'll just settle for the one thing, and it's just kind of to me, that's just no way to live. Like, what's the point of doing what is the point of doing all this shit if you're not gonna be happy? Gary says, as a man, I saw my grandfather pay all the bills. I saw my father pay all the bills, and that makes me happy. Happiness is a product of good living. I definitely agree with that. But I almost feel like it's a limited view. Like, your happiness can't just be limited to paying bills. Great to pay them. Them bills come whether you happy or not. That's for damn sure. But like, it's got to be something else. Or maybe I'm just thinking about this a little too from an existential standpoint. But anyway, I wanted to share that with you. And I agree with this comment. Men's happiness is the last of priorities in society. Listen, whether men may not agree with this, but when we talk about the patriarchy, these set of rules and conditions, that white men, let's be frank, they are the ones who came up with these, and they don't necessarily apply to every culture, and they certainly are in service of white supremacy and also capitalism. This idea that men have to be on this certain particular rat race is killing y'all too. And I don't think, especially when it comes to capitalism, I got a whole other podcast and a whole other YouTube I could do about hustle culture, but I'm gonna save that one for another day. But anyway, so I just wanted to cover that real quickly. And finally, so I think I mentioned to you all that I was in New York City for the better part of this week. I just got back this morning, did Abby Phillips show, and then Auntie decided to hang out and go to the Met Gala. Now, not the actual gala, sorry, the after parties. Now, I blame my dear friend Carrie Champion, because Carrie, she was like, you got to come to this party with me. It's going to be live. And I was like, okay, all right, I think I could do it. And then she told me the party started at midnight. I was like, excuse me, midnight, as in 12 a.m.? Listen, I am of that particular seasoned age where if we ain't leaving the house before 9 o'clock, your girl ain't going to be there. If I ain't got some place to sit down, your girl ain't going to be there. All right, I have stipulations that need to be met. Is it food? Is it parking? We Uber it. Like, I need to know about 25 things before I commit to going out. But nevertheless, it was LeBron James's wife, Savannah James. LeBron James was actually an honorary chair in this year's Met Gala. He was unable to make it because of a knee injury that looked, I think, a lot more significant than people thought. He not tore his MCL. He injured his MCL, and he wasn't able to attend the Met Gala, which is, I know, something that is very important to him. His wife, though, held it down, and that party, we had ourselves a time. I'll show you guys a little picture here. That is me and Carrie at Savannah James's party. And, I had to tap back into sort of the party G that I used to be. You know what I'm saying? And so I was able to stay out late. Took a nap earlier in the day. I prepped for this. All right. Okay, for this night. And even though I had to do Angela Yee's show, Way Up With You, shout out to Angela Yee, who's great. I had to do her show the next morning. I was in them New York streets till about 3:30 in the morning, having myself a ball. Now, I always think one of the best things about going to a party, or like, when it's like a big event, like a Met Gala, a Super Bowl, I used to do this all the time. To me, the best party is the party you sneak into. Like, it just makes me feel invigorated. Goes back to my youth. And, when we in our 20s and we trying to get up in the club and either not pay or just trying to get our way up in this into some like, really grown and sexy environment. And we used to go by I remember when I went to Michigan State, me and my girl used to hang out with some of the guys on the Michigan State football team, and they would go, whenever they go to a party, we try to roll with them, because their way of getting into parties was telling the dude at the door, we could do this the easy way or the hard way. I think you can guess which one they chose. They chose option A, which was the easy way. The easy way was letting all 30 of us in. That was the easy way. The hard way is, as one particular football player I used to hang out with would say to, the bouncer or whoever was working the door, you could either let us in or we could tear this up, what up. And again, chose option A all the time. But it was a time. And so, sneaking into the parties, I became very expert at doing this. So with Savannah James, where she had her party, we were invited. So that was all good. There on the upper level was another party. Pharrell was throwing his party. Now, Karen and I we were not on the list to go to that party. We didn't have, we knew some people who might be there. But to me, because I'd certainly hate when people do this to me. Like, y'all ever been in a party, you kicking it, you have a good time, and then your phone is blowing up because all the homies trying to get in. They asking you, like, can you get us in? Like, once I'm in the party, I'm in the party. I don't have time to pay Julie, the party director, and get everybody in. I might get a couple of y'all in, but that's it. So knowing this, we devised our plan to sneak into Pharrell's party. We're like, we don't need no help. We know some people in there, but we're going to get in on our own cunning and our own je ne sais quoi, as they say. So we had some people take us upstairs, not celebrities or anything, upstairs to Pharrell's party, but we acted like we had been invited and that, we were just being led into this party. That's how you play the role. So you got to act like you belong in the party to sneak into the party. So basically, we just acted like we belonged. And next thing you know, we in Pharrell's party. Now, these celebrity parties, there's always tiers. There's always layers. And there was another VIP in the party that we were trying to get to that we heard where some more cool people was. But nevertheless, in Pharrell's party, people was in there playing Uno, saw Simone Biles, her husband, Jonathan Owens, the YouTuber, or the streamer, I should say, not YouTuber, the streamer, Kai Cenat. It was, your girl had a good time. And, now that I'm fully in my auntie era, one thing that I do is like, I don't really dance anymore. And I was always the Black girl who didn't really dance. I have rhythm, but I just don't dance. But you know what I can do? I can do this. I am the best chair dancer you will ever meet in your life. When it comes to dancing in the chair, two-stepping in the chair, y'all ain't got nothing on me. Nothing. You hear me? Nothing. Look at those elite chair dancing moves. Y'all don't want to see me. Y'all don't want to see me sitting down, getting my groove on. Y'all ain't ready for that. All right. That's what I do best. Anyway, the Met Gala was spectacular. I watched probably more of the Met Gala coverage than I ever have. And the big reason was because I knew we were going to this party. And when people were talking about various people's outlets, outfits or whatever, I wanted to know what I was talking about. So I made sure that I watched the Met Gala coverage. And it was a lot of beautiful people there, a lot of, fabulousness. But I have to give it to a lot of the athletes. Like, a lot of them really brought it. To me, and it was tough. But to me, I think this was the best dressed athlete I saw at the Met Gala. And that would be Angel Reese. Angel Reese did not come to play. She also was on one of the committees for the Met Gala, which is a huge honor. But Angel Reese, she ain't come to play with them there. And, she went to the Met Gala, made it to practice the next day. And I think the next day was actually her birthday. But it was amazing to see so many people, so many athletes there. As I mentioned, Simone Biles, Sasha Carey Richardson, Jalen Hurts, Colin Kaepernick and his wife, who looked amazing, both of them. So, D Wade and Gabby, like a lot of the sports community was definitely representing for the Met Gala. Anyway, that was all I had for this week's show. I went a little bit over. Usually I try to keep it to an hour, but you know how that can be sometimes. We got into a good conversation, especially with Malik. Want to thank him again for joining me for WTH Wednesday. Gonna reiterate an announcement in case you weren't here at the top of this live on Tuesday, starting this Tuesday, and make sure y'all tune in. This is the benefit of subscribing. You'll know when these things are happening. I mentioned Carrie Champion, who drugged me to this party. Carrie and I are going to be doing some YouTube lives together for every Tuesday in May, talking our ish Tuesday, if you will. Her and I will be on here talking about sports, pop culture, news, politics. We'll run the gamut, get into some good conversations with you all, maybe bring some of our friends along. So make sure that you tune in on Tuesday. It'll be Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Those of you who have watched Carrie and I on other platforms, we had a show on Vice. Make sure that you return here to, hear some good conversation. So I appreciate the support. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will see y'all next week. Be easy.